Need computer training for a group or office? Contact us today to get a free demo of our training at www.teachucomp.com/enterprise-licensing.
In Photoshop, we can use the shape tools located in the toolbox to create various vector shapes in our image. When you create a vector shape in an image in CS6 and later, it will be created in its own vector layer. Having familiarized ourselves with how layers and layer masks work earlier in the Photoshop course, this concept shouldn't be too tough for us to grasp. When you create a new shape with one of the shape tools, it creates a new vector layer in the Layers panel. The layer is then filled with the currently selected foreground color, although we can specify and change the fill as needed. And the outline of the shape that is drawn on the layer is actually stored as a linked vector mask that is linked to the layer, restricting the display of the layer to the pattern stored in the linked vector mask. As such, we can then draw multiple shapes on a single layer, adding to our original shapes drawn on the vector mask for a single layer. You can even determine how overlapping shapes in a vector layer are to interact with one another. So to create a new vector layer with a shape in it, right-click the Shape Tool button in the toolbox and select which shape you'd like to draw. Let's go ahead and do that. Right-click there, we'll select the rounded rectangle tool. And then we'll want to look up in the options bar. You'll see that the options are going to change depending on which tool you selected, but a lot of them will be very similar. Let's look at some of these. First, we have this drop-down right here, which is called the Shape Options drop-down, which allows you to select the type of shape that you want to create. You select Shape to create a new vector shape in a layer, or you can select Path to create a work path, or you can select Pixels to fill in pixels in a raster layer in the desired shape. Version CS6 changed the old shape layer functionality and replaced it with vector layers, which allow for true fill and stroke and a number of other functions that were never possible with the old shape layers. So, for example, you can select the fill option here, and you can also select a different color by clicking on there. You could select a gradient, you could select a pattern to fill it in, and so forth. I think we'll go ahead and leave that color selected right now. As far as the stroke options go, that's just to the right of the fill there. We could click on stroke, and again, we could change the color. If we wanted to, we could use the drop down here to select the point size of the stroke. And again, we have learned that in the chapter for filling and stroking, so I ask you to refer to that if you have questions about how to apply strokes. It's pretty easy. You can also set a specific width and height to your shape by entering the desired values in those text boxes in the options bar, and then easily create it by single-clicking into your image where you want the shape to appear. So I could select, for example, 450 by 150 and give a click into my image in the middle here. Dialog box will pop up with the parameters that I've inserted. Click OK, and our shape appears with our stroke around it with the appropriate fill that we have selected. Now, by default, the shape tools draw a new shape layer every time you click and drag with the tool. However, you can add several shapes to the same layer. The Path Operations dropdown is where you choose what type of interaction you want your shape to have with the shape layer. So that's right here, this drop down. You can select a new layer, which again is the default. You can select Combine the Shapes to combine the shapes. We also have Subtract from Shape, and if you select the Subtract from Shape layer, the shape will be subtracted from the current layer shape vector mask selected in the Layers panel. If you select Intersect with Shape areas here, the shape that you draw will only display the foreground colors in areas where the shape that you draw intersects other previously drawn shapes in the associated shape layer. And then finally, if you click the Exclude Overlapping Shape Options button, The foreground color will display in the non-overlapping areas of shapes that overlap in the shape layer. So if we click and drag again into our image, the areas that overlap there, as we can see what happens to the image as those shapes interact with each other. Now, with multiple shapes selected, you can use the path alignment and path arrangement drop-downs to choose to align selected shapes, either to the selection or canvas, distribute shapes, and or change the stacking order of the shapes. So we could go down here, for example, and use our selection tools, and we will go ahead and select both of these shapes. And then we'll go back up into the options bar. We'll select the drop down, and let's say we want to align them by their right edges. We'll select that, and it will align those shapes like that. Now, if you have only one shape selected and you want to change how it is in the stacking order, then you can go to the next option, which is the path arrangement, and you can say bring shape to front, bring shape forward, bring shape backward, send shape to back. This is very similar to other applications like Microsoft Word and PowerPoint, where you have these different objects that are stacked on top of each other, and in this way you can change how they're stacked in your image. Now, after you make all your selections, you then just click and drag as we've done to create a new shape. Now, if you had selected the new shape layer options, the shape will appear as a new layer. Otherwise, it's going to interact with the current layer selected in the Layers panel in the way you prescribed by the options that you set up in the options bar.
Like what you see? Get a free demo of our training for groups of 5 or more at www.teachucomp.com/enterprise-licensing.